Dear friends, welcome to this service of memory and sacred story, to mourn and to bless and to celebrate the life of Peter Eric Jahn. I'm Reverend Luke Stevens Royer. I'm minister at First Unitarian Universalist Church in Rochester, Minnesota, where Simon and Anne Marie, Peter's daughter, are members. It has been my pleasure to meet with some of the family online in these days, to hear stories and to hear reflections and to hear love for Peter's life. We gather this day across the distance in a sacred circle of love because this dear loved one has died. And more importantly, we gather this day because a dear loved one has lived a full life. Peter did, with love and laughter, sorrow, and with grief, a full human life with all its challenges and its abundance of blessings. We gather because that life mattered to each of you, each in a unique way. That life, Peter's life, touched yours somehow in 1,000 different ways, from a favorite memory of time spent with him, or maybe the way something he did or something he said stays with you, that you now do or say, changed you somehow, impacted how you live, how you think, how you talk, how you love, those small moments or words that you shared with him. Each of you hold your own experience and story and memory of Peter. Even in our being distant in this time, we gather together today across time and space to bring together these stories, all these threads of how Peter's life has left a legacy in this world and in your hearts. You'll hear from family in videos recorded across distance, and we know that not one story or one service can hold all that he was, not even close, but we are grateful for the ways we can weave together these stories today. A special thank you to all those who were able to send in memories, and to our church musician Austin for playing, and Joe as well for playing the cello you'll hear in the background, and for our choir offering one of their recorded pieces from our church, and mostly for all of you taking the time to gather in this odd way to gather right now, but to do so in reverence and love. And so today, as we begin, I light this chalice flame. This chalice in our church is a symbol of welcome and of hope, and so we say welcome to this time together. It's a symbol of memory and story. It's a symbol for us of everlasting and unfailing love, a love that holds us all, no matter where we are from. I light it in gratitude and in honor of Peter. And welcome.
everyone, and thank you for attending Peter's memorial service. I want you to know that we had a long life together with many exciting adventures. We had 2 children, Anne Marie and Paul, who are both wonderful, talented people. Paul married Valerie, and Anne Marie married Simon, and they rewarded us with 3 grandchildren, Arthur, Emma, and Hayden. We were married for 60 years, and I will miss him.
Hi, this is Peter's son, Paul. I'd like to thank you so much for all the love and affection that you had for my dad, and for all the kindness that you've shown my mom and our whole family since his passing. And I'd like to share this remembrance of him with you. One of my dad's great passions, which I'm sure you all know of, was that he loved to plan things out very carefully, always with the goal of stymieing some foe of the day. In fact, one of his favorite toasts was confusion to the enemy, and I'm sure that you heard that many times. Certainly we did when I was growing up. Well, one of our favorite stories of Dad's planning and it leading him to victory is the story of how he and his childhood friend Jimmy Rafferty sailed Jimmy's schooner in the Mayor's Cup Regatta in the upper New York Harbor, and how they won that day, all through a strategy that my dad came up with. Well, the regatta is really a very sort of unorthodox race in that boats of all shapes and sizes from all classes compete together, and the Mayor's Cup goes to the first boat across the finish line, irrespective of class divisions. And that, naturally, my dad was certainly aware, favors the big boats, because your speed in the water is really very much determined in a sailboat by how long the water line is, at least in all these displacement hull boats. And Jimmy's boat wasn't the biggest one in the fleet by any means, but he also figured out through careful review of charts leading up to the race that there was a slot that ran down from the Hudson River past the starting line near the Statue of Liberty. And if you hugged along the coast of New Jersey, the water was much more advantageous, the current there, than elsewhere in the harbor. But it was pretty shallow there as well, so you couldn't have a boat with much displacement, and that favored the small. So, true to the plan, my dad and Jimmy shot their schooner down along that current and passed by on the port side many a very huge yacht whose owners were thinking that merely buying a big boat was going to mean they were going to get trophies as well. But that wasn't the case that day, and the schooner that my dad was navigating got out in front of them all and then had a tack and came across to Brooklyn to the finish line ahead of everyone else, and they won the Mayor's Cup, which they were all very proud of. It was really a frustration of my dad that, notwithstanding that they won, that the next year all those people in those big yachts got together and got the rules changed so that the course my dad and Jimmy followed was out of bounds for the future. But to me, that's just just evidence that he had truly outsmarted them. So tonight, if you have a drink, I'd like you to remember my dad. I'd like you to toast to the confusion of all those big boats and give a toast to my dad who bested them all. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to celebrate the life of my dad, Peter Jahn. I'm Anne Marie, and I'm Brendan Peter John's daughter. My dad has been a part of my life for 59 years that I've been here in this world. He was a great adventurer, and some of my earliest childhood memories are of sailing around New York Harbor around the Statue of Liberty in a sailboat with him. I also vividly remember when I was 5 years old when he traveled to Rwanda in Africa to work on a U.S. aid project there to build a water treatment plant in the country that had recently gained independence from Belgium. The stories he told were both scary and funny about canoeing with crocodiles and hippos and all the travails he went through to build this plant in Africa in that era, 1965. My dad valued education too. He really cared that my brother and I would know about history. And I remember in high school, he had us watching The World at War every Sunday so that we would know about the history of World War II. And I think being forward for his time, he cared about my opportunities as a young woman and a girl to learn math and science. And he actually taught me so much of the math and the methods and the logic that I've retained until now, some of the biggest learnings of all my high school and college years. I learned from him. He was funny and he was quirky. He loved dogs and they loved him back. They knew he was nice to them. He loved really interesting pocket knives. And his dad was half Danish and he loved everything Danish. He loved everything about the Vikings and he enjoyed Danish food and loved that Scandinavian part of himself. He also always ate blueberry pie on his birthday because my whole family, save my mom, was born in November, and we ate cake until his birthday when we ate pie. My parents had an incredible bond between the two of them and supported each other throughout their lives and had such mutual dedication to each other. They were glamorous as young people, and I always would see them dressing up and going to parties in New York, and they just looked like a wonderful couple to me as a child. And then we had other adventures together as a family. We moved to California from New York and drove across the country. And as my brother and I grew older, we also went on sailing adventures with my parents. I went with my parents and their friends to Tonga, and my brother and I went together with them to the Caribbean, and we had true adventures in places that few people have a chance to go, to places that were somewhat dangerous, but my dad and my mom always kept us extremely safe with their knowledge of the boat and the seas, and the waves and the wind. My parents were incredibly responsible people. They did everything with care, and they contributed to the community that they lived in through Toastmasters, through the Society of Mining Engineers, and other groups where they made huge contributions and helped so many people. When their son Arthur, my son, was born, they had a lot of fun together. And my parents took him to Legoland and Disneyland and the beach and the zoo, but they also took him to visit a gold mine, and they took him to Society of Mining Engineers meetings and to Toastmasters meetings so he could see them in the things that they did in their lives. They always liked to eat ice cream and pancakes for dinner and call themselves the party animals, much to the worry of Arthur's parents. My dad's friends have reached out to me and my mom and my brother to share some of their memories of him, of his sense of humor, of his sharp engineering mind, of the great stories he told, and the valuable advice he gave. And very touchingly, they shared that even when he was very sick at the end of his life, he always had kind words to share and a big smile. He was a profound influence on my life and helped me grow my love of adventure and my desire to be a citizen in the world, to travel, to live in other countries, and go to other places. And I think I also chose my husband because he's also a structural engineer and shared that same engineering mind. And now I see my son carrying this on with his engineering thinking and his creativity. So he lives in our hearts and our minds forever. I thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Goodbye.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden so play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word.
Some people have asked me to contribute to the memorial, and some of my memories of Peter and some of the things we did together over the years. So I didn't really think of one particularly strong, if you will, memory, but I thought of a number of smaller ones and thought I would at least describe some of them here today. My first experience with sailing on a sailboat came with Brenda and Peter. As everybody probably knows, they had a 24-foot, 26-foot Ravens class sailboat. And I got invited to come sailing by my sister one weekend. Little did I know I was an invitation to replace one of their regular sailors, Gunnar Anderson, who used to be their jib handler. And of course, I'd never been on a sailboat in my life. Anyway, after hauling all of the gear and equipment from the car over to Cross Island Parkway, out the pier of Little Neck Bay, onto the launch, onto the boat, we finally got underway. And I didn't realize that our first part of the trip was going to be transiting from Little Neck Bay to Manhasset Bay with sailboat, where the sailboat would be racing. And I was going to be one of the crew members helping the racing effort. So during the 3+ or so hours transiting to Manhasset Bay, I got my first sailing lesson from Peter, which was good, and he was understanding and nice. And then as we got to Manhasset Bay, it was time for lunch, and also to go in the water and clean the bottom of the boat, which Peter and I did. It was another learning experience of scrubbing the marine growth off the bottom, because it was sitting all week in Little Neck Bay. Anyway, we got to the sailing part of the day, and that was somewhat exciting. It was a race, and of course I spent most of my time tripping over the centerboard compartment and banging my knees and my shins and not getting up soon enough and not doing this soon enough. But I survived, and I was able to go on other sailing encounters with the team if and when there was an open space. So our team that particular day was Peter and Brenda and Peter's father, Frank, and me. Anyway, that I guess is my sum total of sailing. But then later on, and as we got to deal with, know Peter more, he used to help me with different things. One of them was algebra in high school, my freshman year. Fortunately, I wound up with a teacher who liked to tell us his World War II adventures and not much algebra. And the problem was when he gave us the test, it wasn't about World War II, it was about algebra. But between Peter and a new algebra teacher in the second semester, I made out pretty good there, and I was able to continue on. And then we go back to sailing, another sailing experience. At the summer, I guess it was early summer, late spring. Peter was doing some project on the centerboard of the boat, and I happened to be doing some work as an umpire for CYO baseball games, and my sister called and said, "Why don't you stop by to John's house for lunch or something, because we're going to be there." So when I got there, the centerboard of the boat was hanging off from a tree, and Peter had done all of his repairs to it, and I got the privilege of helping sand this for like 2 days straight, all of the epoxy that he had filled into the centerboard. Another rewarding experience, I think. And of course, as I was then in high school preparing for college, one of my thoughts was to be an engineer. And I will say that Peter did recommend that I go to Fort Schuyler for engineering rather than Kings Point, as he, and I guess he felt others, thought that the engineering curriculum at Fort Schuyler was much more rigorous than at Kings Point, and he was right, it was, and it was probably the best choice for me for engineering. And as for my birthday present, going to Fort Schuyler, I received a set of drafting tools, so I would be able to do the mechanical drawing work during that class. So Fort Schuyler was sort of challenging and busy and a lot of things to do, but we did contact, myself and my classmates did contact Peter occasionally for advice on strength and materials projects and other sort of civil engineering things that we were taking in addition to our other engineering courses. I think one of our projects was to design a structure, and the winning structure would be the strongest and lightest weight of all of the structures created by the students. Of course, our structure became the strongest, but it was also the heaviest of all of them. So I'm not sure what we got out of that, if we got a prize or not. But anyway, after Fort Schuyler, I was busy working in different places, and at one point I was in San Diego for 6 or 8 months, and Brenda and Peter's house became my sort of home away from home on weekends for a few months there, and that was always nice to go and see them. And then later on, as I was traveling around chasing ships, their house became sort of a way station for me on my trips to Asia and the Pacific region, which again, Peter was always, welcoming and kind, and always had a good word, always was interested in what I was doing, and was always telling me about his projects all over the world. And in retrospect, a lot of the stuff that he did is similar to what I did, although mine was on ships and he was on, mines and buildings and bridges and stuff. I think that's, most of what I remember of him. Thank you.
My name is Gene Dewey. My wife and I have been friends of Peter and Brenda for over 40 years. I met Peter at a Society of Mining and Metallurgical Engineering meeting in Los Angeles back in 1980. It was then known as AIME. During that discussion, I mentioned I was interested in sailing, and he invited Lynn and I to join he and Brenda on a day sail out of Marina del Rey. That was the beginning of a friendship and sailing ventures that covered 4 decades. We sailed many places of the world together. One of our early adventures in Mexico, off the coast of Loreto, Mexico, in the Sea of Cortez, on the first day of our charter, early in the morning, we found ourselves 15 miles away from a Class 3 hurricane bearing down on Loreto. We managed to find a safe anchorage, thanks to Peter's wonderful wisdom. We also shared a love of mining and did several field trips together. And over the years, we've always had a common interest to discuss while we were sailing or tripping. I'll never forget that during a cyclone about 200 miles north of the island country of Tonga, where we were on a sailing adventure with Peter, Brenda, and Anna Marie, we met a nurse from Australia who had married a doctor who had been practicing in Vavahu for over 30 years. While we were out shopping in the morning, Brenda had found a book that was written about Tonga by that nurse. When they returned back to the base, she mentioned to the moorings base captain the book. He said, well, while you were away, your crewmate took the author of that book back to her house on the island across the bay. He did not have time to do it because of the cyclone, and I volunteered to take her. In the course, she invited us over for tea. I mentioned that, and we agreed to accept the invitation. The weather was severe. Peter volunteered to stay on board the boat and watch the boat while we went ashore to visit with this wonderful lady. When she found out Brenda was a nurse, she spent the next 2 hours querying her about the state of the art of medicine. We will forever be grateful to Peter and Brenda for allowing us to share these adventures and experiences with them, and we'll miss forever Peter's sage advice and wisdom. Thank you.
I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. You used to rock me in the cradle of your arms. You said you'd hold me till the pains of life were gone. You said you'd comfort me in times like these, and now I need you, and now I need you, and you are gone. So I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Since you've gone and left me, there's been so little beauty, but I know I saw it clearly through your eyes. Now the world outside is such a cold and bitter place. Here inside I have few things that will console. And when I try to hear your voice above the storms of life, then I remember that I was told. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I think of the things that made me feel so wonderful when I was young. I think on the things that made me laugh, made me dance, made me sing. I think on the things that made me grow into a being full of pride. Think on these things, for they are true. And I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I thought that you were gone, but now I know you're with me. You are the voice that whispers all I need to hear. I know a please, a thank you, and a smile will take me far. I know that I am you and you are me and we are one. I know that who I am is numbered in each grain of sand. I know that I know that I can love you again and again and again. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own
There isn't much more to say. Not much more at all that I can say, in addition to these stories and the love already shared by dear loved ones of Peter's. And yet there's so much more to say than any one service or even all these stories and reflections can hold to put into words the entirety of someone's life, which is impossible. As you know, Peter was a master engineer, precise and attentive to details of the how things ought to be built and constructed. And it sounds like he was quite clear on how things ought to be done often. And that clarity served him well, creating things of possibility, of connection, of safety, from bridges to demilitarizing materials to providing water to communities. He used his skill in knowing the how of things in service of the why in this life, which was always for the betterment, for the building up of humanity, creating solid structures that would serve people and communities well. And his attention to details, to the structures of his life and this world, was also met with a deep love for this world. Words that friends and family shared about him were that he was kind, he was happy, he didn't harbor resentment, he was helpful, he was a good friend. He helped people figure out what needed figuring out, something he was good at and loved to do. His desire to live was determined because he loved this world and his family so deeply. Peter was a navigator in this life in every way possible, not only navigating the complexities of engineering, but also the unpredictable waves of the sea, the literal ocean, with a deep love and equal level of skill of sailing. As Anne-Marie shared, there are things people often wouldn't feel safe doing with most average people, but you'd feel safe doing them with Peter because he really knew what he was doing. His attention to all that was going on, not only the mechanics, but the people and where people were on the boat. his engineering mind put to work to create moments and experiences with loved ones on the water, finding their way toward love and joy and stories and memories. Peter built a life that was solid, with a solid partnership and marriage of over 60 years, built on foundations of love and trust and respect. As his wife Brenda shared, we always had each other's back, she says. We were a team. We supported each other. That's no small feat. And it takes both a detailed attention and a nimble navigation of unpredictable waves in life that crash in all the time. And together in his work and his life, he met all those obstacles, all those challenges, all those unpredictable, giant crashing waves with curiosity, with skill, with love to find his way. Peter built a life that was solid, one that withstood so much and almost seemed to know when it was time to lay it down. Perhaps that's what we all really hope for. A life built on solid foundations with just enough skill and massive amounts of love to find our way through the waves, through the changes, side by side with those we love. Amen. I invite you now, as we hold all these stories shared, as we hold our own memory and grief, as well as gratitude and love, to take a breath wherever you are. And breathe deep the breath of life. And join me in a time, a moment of meditation, a moment of prayer, no matter what, if any, tradition you may come from, to join in a spirit of reverent remembering, honoring Peter's life. Spirit of life and source of love, God of 1,000 names and beyond all naming, may these tender days and this tender loss remind us not only how our hearts can break when we lose someone we love, but also how our hearts can break open, ever wider, nourished by our ancestors and their love, leading us forward in ways we know and in ways we can't quite name. And in that living and in that remembering, may their soul and spirit live on. May our hearts joined across the distance give us each other comfort this day, and may Peter's memory live on within us and the world. Amen. As we close today, I offer this reading from the Jewish tradition. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, in the blueness of the skies and the warmth of summer, in the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick in heart, when we have joy we crave to share, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now part of us as we remember Peter. May it be so. Amen. I extinguish our chalice with these words. Dear Peter, beloved of earth, of sky, of stars, of God, of spirit, from the dust and earth from whence you came, the earth you loved so much, so now you return. May you be held by the embrace of love eternal, one with the earth and the stars and the spirit of life. May love hold you and us on our way. As you go on your way, may love go with you. May love go before you to show you the way. And may love go behind you to encourage you, beside you to befriend you, above you to watch over, within you to give you peace. Amen.